Hi, I'm Polly Howes, Associate Professor of Public Relations at Kennesaw State University. I'm going to share with you an overview of my study on the convergence of sport and ceremony in the opening ceremonies of the Olympic Winter Games in Sochi and PyeongChang. Ceremony and ritual have been a part of the Olympic Games from ancient Greek times to Pierre de Coubertin's resurrected modern games. Host countries have used this global sports event to achieve various objectives, and Olympic opening ceremonies have portrayed national image and cultural identity of host countries. Scholars have documented the great complexity in establishing national image and identity. Mega events such as the Olympic Games are one way of expressing a desired image, and as a media event, opening ceremonies provide a communication vehicle for media coverage as well as a viewing audience. Increasingly elaborate in design and execution, Summer Games opening ceremonies have attracted close examination. The Beijing opening ceremony, for example, has been studied extensively for its artfully crafted staging to present China as a world power, but in a subtle, culturally rich way. Though smaller in scale, Winter Games also open with a carefully planned ceremony. This study expanded on previous work by examining the communication effectiveness of the opening ceremonies for the Winter Games in Sochi in 2014 and PyeongChang in 2018. It addressed how these ceremonies were used to convey messages of national image and cultural identity for Russia and South Korea. Also, to what degree those messages were reflected in U.S. newspaper coverage, and how the two ceremonies compare in their effectiveness as a communication platform. The study followed a qualitative approach that included viewing videos of the ceremonies, identifying the communication objectives and intended messaging of the host countries, and analyzing the content of articles in a purposive sample of U.S. newspapers. The Sochi opening ceremony, called Dream of Russia, featured a young girl traveling through history and time. The host country wanted to remind the world of Russia's dramatic history, cultural contributions, and return to the global stage after the fall of communism. News coverage of the event included much of the desired messaging, but often with an edge. The theme of Russia is back led many stories, some in a congratulatory way, but others with a cynical tone, critical of the Soviet years and noting revisionist representation of the past. A major technical glitch gave media an embarrassing news hook when one of the 5 lighted snowflakes failed to convert to an Olympic ring. Most stories referenced Russia's well-known cultural contributions, yet they also mentioned a number of issues and concerns outside of the opening ceremony itself, ranging from Russia's anti-gay policies and unfinished facilities to President Putin's heavy influence and the absence of many world leaders. Looking at PyeongChang, peace was the chosen theme there, and this was chosen long before North Korea's participation was a reality. Olympic organizers sought to create an image of a peace-loving South Korea while promoting peace worldwide. Children served as guides through a colorful story of Korean culture and traditions, along with the country's current achievements in innovation and technology. In the coverage, messages of peace and unity and harmony dominated. This was underscored by North Korea's participation, of course. The tone of the stories was hopeful, but not always optimistic of lasting impact. Korean traditions and culture were only mentioned briefly. The stories also noted the mutual avoidance of North Korean and U.S. leaders in the VIP box and the limited presence of Russian athletes due to IOC punishment for doping. So in sum, based on the analysis, strategic messaging was clearly a part of the planning and creative execution of opening ceremonies for both Winter Games. Major U.S. newspaper stories did reflect much of the desired messaging, but in varied tone, points of emphasis, and level of detail. Overall, effectiveness of opening ceremonies as conveyors of national image and cultural identity appear mixed. PyeongChang's messaging was expressed more directly and consistently than was Sochi's. In both cases, external factors influenced coverage, positively for PyeongChang and negatively for Sochi. So this study has limitations with its qualitative approach and number of stories analyzed. But that said, it affirms that opening ceremonies of Olympic Winter Games, just as the Summer Games, serve as communication platforms for host countries to shape their national image and cultural identity. While the impact of external factors and the outcome of media stories cannot be controlled, having clear messages provides the foundation necessary for all effective forms of communication.